Morning, West Edmonton Baptist. It is such a pleasure to be here with you guys this morning. I've been really looking forwards to it, and Beth and I have lots to share today. As mentioned, I'm Lauren Reed, Hope Mission's Community Liaison. And I get the pleasure of working with your very own Beth. I've heard that she's also known as Elizabeth, so I'm sorry for any confusion that might occur during this process this morning. So Beth is a community health nurse with Hope Mission, and she serves on two teams. The first is our family wellness team, working with children and families in the North Edmonton. And she also serves in our shelters downtown. So she really gets the broad scope of what we do at Hope Mission. So this morning, we just wanted to start by thanking you all. As a congregation, you have very compassionate and empathetic hearts from what conversations I've had and just your history of support for the work that God does through Hope Mission. And we're so grateful for that. So thank you so much. Today I'm going to be sharing a bit of the history of Hope Mission across Edmonton and Alberta, and Beth is going to be interjecting every now and then with some of her personal stories of experience working with Hope Mission. So without further ado, if we can go way back to 1929, when Hope Mission was first founded by a small group of people from a few different churches, and they worked tirelessly in small spaces responding to the large numbers of people experiencing homelessness due to the Great Depression. And at that time, they worked very hard to make sure that everybody who needed it got a hot meal, and as many people as they could fit in their small spaces could have a safe place to sleep at night. What's interesting is that even back then, Hope Mission didn't just serve people experiencing homelessness. They also reached out and served people, vulnerable populations across Alberta. So at this time, it was very difficult for many families, especially in rural areas, and they would have parents reaching out to them in true distress because they didn't have enough clothes, something simple as clothes, to keep them and their children safe from the cold temperatures. So Hope Mission would gather everything that they could together and send them off to these families and make sure that they were safe from our extreme temperatures. So it's been a long time since then, and Hope Mission now consists mainly of three different branches. The first is shelters and emergency care. Sorry, I guess it's a little hard to see the orange. The second is our addiction recovery programs, and the third is our preventative ministries. So I'd like to start off today with our shelters and emergency care, if you want to bring that one up. And there's so many different aspects and programs and services that come together to make up shelters and emergency care. But the heart of all of them is to provide people with the opportunity to embark on a journey from hardship to hope. So for many people, this journey begins with our 24/7 rescue van. Now, if you're ever walking along the streets, I think we've all encountered this situation where you see something and you're not sure if it's okay. You see somebody who might be in a vulnerable circumstance or situation. Maybe they seem a little bit distressed. They might be a bit confused or disoriented. You might find that they're not appropriately dressed for the weather, or they've fallen asleep in the hot sun. When you encounter these kinds of situations, you can call 211 extension 3, and Alberta Health will actually dispatch one of our 24/7 rescue vans to the person and place of your description, and we'll make sure that they get all the care they require to stay safe. And this partnership was actually born a few years back in a crisis that Edmonton was facing, where ambulances were being so overrun with calls that they weren't making it to emergency situations in time, which is a very bad thing. And so by partnering with the city, we were able to make sure that people's vulnerable circumstances still got cared for, but so that they didn't become emergency situations, but we weren't overrunning the healthcare system with calls that weren't actual emergencies, and our EMS and ambulances were able to do the job that they were built for. So the different services that our rescue van provides can look anything like handing out water bottles, bagged lunches. It looks like giving people rides to safer locations. And of course, a huge part of what we do is look out for people and make sure they're safe from the various kinds of extreme weather that we experience here. So in the winter, of course, that's toques and mittens and jackets and blankets and getting people rides to shelter in the warmth and out of the cold, making sure that people aren't getting hypothermia or frostbite. In the summer, it looks like making sure people have sunscreen and hats, that they're, in shelter out of the sun and in the shade. We spend a lot of time passing out water bottles. We've encountered people who were so dehydrated that they were struggling to function and even to walk. At other times, we've encountered people who had fallen asleep in the shade and had woken up in the sun with blistering burns. And so it's so important that we're able to be out there and that really all of us can pitch in and make sure that if we see somebody who might be struggling with weather-related things, to call 211 because it makes a huge difference. And I'll just briefly mention, there's 2 other seasons. One of them we're in right now, and we tend to think of them as more mild temperatures. But as you can see today, it can be very wet. And on top of that, during these times, you get really dramatic changes in temperature. So during the day, it's hot. Our friends experiencing homelessness are shedding their clothes because they're too hot. But they're also getting really wet feet as they walk around all day. And then at nighttime, the temperatures drop into freezing, which ends up putting them in a position where they're at risk of frostbite. So we pass out proper footwear and socks like candy during these months. So that's a huge part of what this rescue van does. But a core part of our rescue vans is also the emotional and relational care that we provide. Our teams are such caring people. They have such a heart for our friends experiencing homelessness, and they don't just pass out bagged lunches, they sit with our neighbors in need. They talk with them, they pray with them, they listen to them. And for so many people, these kind interactions end up being just as valuable as the water bottles and bagged lunches. So from here, our friends experiencing homelessness, their journeys really take off as they're welcomed into our shelters downtown. Now, of course, our shelters, they provide hot meals, they provide a safe place to sleep, but we also provide a lot of different services like showers and laundry. We make sure that people have the different clothing and hygiene items that they need. And these things might seem simple and small, but I don't know if you guys can remember way back to the day where everything shut down and we couldn't get haircuts. And I don't know about you, but I saw a lot of people, myself included, going crazy. We lost our minds. And don't quote me on this, but I think there might have been a black market for haircuts at that time. And so, we all, little things like haircuts are important to us. And for our neighbors experiencing homelessness, it's those same small things, the same smiles and kind interactions, the opportunity to take a shower and wear clean clothing that go a long way to experiencing dignity. And it is so important for their emotional and mental well-being, as well as their physical health. Beth and I, as well as our shelter staff, hear a lot about our clients sharing with us that their first moment of really feeling like there might be hope for them was when they had a hot meal for the first time at Hope Mission. So you really can't underestimate the power of these small things. And when it comes to food, of course, our main shelter downtown does so much. They are making and serving over 1,200 meals a day, as well as putting together 800 bagged lunches that go to our rescue vans, and they pass those out every day as well. So a lot of food being made and served here. And, on top of that, we also have our intake workers that connect clients with different resources and supports that they need to move forwards in their lives. We also have our addiction recovery program for women here. And we are able to provide a safe place to sleep for 300 people in separate spaces for women, couples, and youth, as well as an Intox shelter for 70 people. And Intox is for people who are under the influence of substances. And it's really important for us to be able to provide a safe space for them as well, as there's not many shelters out there where they're able to come and stay. And the reality is that they're more at risk for something like an overdose. And so it's important that we have staff who are able to monitor them, make sure they're okay, and connect them with the medical care they might require. So, another really exciting development, Beth gets to talk at this part. I know she's been doing a great job standing here looking beautiful, but is our new Herb Jamieson Center. So this is another shelter, and the Herb Jamieson Center was originally built in 1950. And over the years, many, many people have experienced transformation as they've come to know Christ and been able to move forwards away from their struggle with addiction. And while it's been such an important place for so many people, the building itself became very run down, and it was no longer a safe place for us to provide the care we wanted for our clients. But before I dive into what all of that looks like, I want to share with you the story of our friend Cameron, who he was a client of ours who went to the Herb Jamieson, and his tale really captures why it was so important for us to invest in this project and this building. So Cameron was born into a family where there was, unfortunately, violence and crime and substance use. His father was largely absent as he was in and out of jail. When he was present, he wasn't a very good presence. So very young into Cameron's life, he wound up ingrained in the same lifestyle, and at the very young age of 10, was entered into our juvenile detention center for 2 years. And after 2 years being in a detention center as a child, he was released and wound up in a situation at 12 years old, realizing that he was going to become a father. So a child himself, he now had to figure out how he was going to provide for a child. And the only way that he knew was from his life experience. And so he became more deeply ingrained in the lifestyle of crime and drugs, and was in and out of juvenile for the majority of his young life until he was in his early 20s when he was in jail for the first time. And during this time, he just decided that he was so over it. He was so done. He wanted to move on from this, but he didn't know any other way of living. He knew no other life, and he didn't know how to break out of the cycles that he was in. So he reached out to his sister, who connected him with the Herb Jamieson. And after he was released from jail, he joined the addiction recovery program at Herb Jamieson. And of course, for many people, this isn't a straight and narrow road, as it's a very difficult struggle. And it was no different for Cameron, and he did wind up in jail once more. But it was so different this time, because he had a community from Herb Jamieson. And we had staff who were there to visit with him, to share with him encouraging words, prayer, comfort, truth, scripture, counsel. And these things allowed him to hold on to hope. And as soon as he was let out, he went straight back to the Herb Jamieson, enrolled in the recovery program again. And the crazy thing is that today, Cameron is married to a woman who actually went through our addiction recovery program for women. They have a little family of their own. They have a house and a car and stable employment. And when Cameron found out that we were rebuilding the Herb Jamieson, he's in construction work, so he called up his friend on the job and asked if he could be a part of it, because he wanted to help rebuild the place that helped him to rebuild his life. Yeah, it's so good. So we've seen God do so many incredible things through the Herb Jamieson. And we needed to continue to see that happening. So thanks to our generous donors and community and to God's consistent faithfulness, guidance, and direction, we were able to tear that building down in 2020. And we now have our new Herb Jameson built. Its doors are opening October 1st. So excited. And here's why it's going to be so amazing. The old building wasn't even wheelchair accessible. And so all of our clients with mobility issues weren't able to access the shelter. Our current new Herb Jameson building, wheelchair accessible. It also has a place for our EMS and ambulances and rescue vans to roll right on in, and a door that goes straight into intox. Now this is really important because the old building had a stairs going downstairs, which for an intox shelter with people who are under the influence of substances is just a bad idea. It's not good to have stairs. So there's no more stairs. We're very grateful for that, and it's a much safer, more dignified transition from vehicle to shelter. The shelter itself has so much more space. So instead of being able to serve 300 people, we're able to serve 400. And a huge part of why we're so excited about the space is that it has room for our team of nurses who provide our clients with basic wound care, as well as connecting them with resources and supports. And I will, of course, let Beth tell you about this because it's what she does.
So yeah, that's definitely true. We have a lot of clients who are coming in for a variety of reasons. Some of them are coming from the rescue van in different situations. Some of them are coming off the street, having slept overnight outside. Some of them have been staying in our shelter for a while. So each of them have their own needs, have their own resources that they're looking for. And when they come to our office, that's definitely something that we kind of sit down and chat with them and learn a bit more about just who they are, as well as figure out how we can help them. So I have one story about one client that we had. I'll call him George. And George came to us initially for a foot wound, which, as Lauren kind of explained earlier, in the wet weather is very common in the shelter. And some of these wounds, depending on their backgrounds, can be very serious and take a very long time to heal. So in the time that we got to work with George for this wound over months, we got to learn more about him, more about his background, where he came from. We were able to connect him with different resources. We brought a lot of people onto his team. He also struggled a lot with some mental health, and to just be able to have people there who cared about him and to have people who were showing up to help him really made a difference. And there was definitely some times that really were heavy on the heart, but we were able to work together, help him with his wound. His wound got a lot better, and right now he's currently in transitional housing and really has great supports around him. And so it was really incredible to be able to see that initial stage of just not feeling like he had anybody there, being brought into the Hope Mission, being supported by all of our staff in a variety of ways, and then also to be able to be there and help him with this wound and make sure that he got into the right housing. And that being said, that's oftentimes another thing that we help out with as well. We have housing teams, but sometimes some of these clients have a little bit more additional medical needs for housing. And so that's a really great opportunity for us to be able to kind of work with them and find out what needs they need and find housing, whether it be supportive living or any variety of intervention needed to help them get into the housing. Because a lot of times some of those clients do get kind of left to the back because it's difficult or it's a long time to get them into that housing. Another thing that often happens is we have clients who lost their funding. So a lot of our clients are on AISH or Alberta Works, so they get government money to help them for a variety of reasons. But unfortunately, a lot of them will lose their AISH or Alberta Works for a variety of reasons. And one of the most common reasons is oftentimes because they didn't file their taxes. And when we talk with them about filing the taxes, we find out they also don't have any ID because their ID got stolen and all their stuff was taken from them. And so it's hard for them to get ID because how do they prove their identity? So a lot of clients are kind of stuck in this place of literally having their identity taken from them, and Hope Mission is a place that we can stop, chat with them, learn more about who they are, and help them, even just with ID, but also in their identity and presence with God as well. So it's really great to be able to walk with them through whatever their needs are and to really see just the joy come onto their faces.
So good. We are so thankful for our nurses. They're just troopers and incredible human beings. So glad to have them there. The Herb Jameson also has space for our rapid exit team, which is a team that works with clients over the course of a year, getting them housed, supports, so that they can continue on independently. And also, of course, our addiction recovery program for men. And that leads us into the second branch of Hope Mission that I'd like to share with you today, which is our addiction recovery programs. So we have Wellspring for women, Breakout for men, and our transitional housing that is provided for graduates of these programs. So if we want to look at Wellspring and Breakout, these are year-long addiction recovery programs where men and women like our friend Cameron have the opportunity to heal, learn, and grow together as they develop deep and meaningful relationships with God and one another. And during this time, they meet with counselors, they attend chapel, they learn about what it means to process and heal from their trauma, as well as to manage their triggers. They also learn a lot of practical life skills like budgeting and goal setting. They learn about healthy life habits and how to have good, healthy boundaries and relationships. And so once they have completed this program, they've learned all of these different tools and skills, how they can move forwards and break free from their addiction. And then they're invited to join our aftercare programming and stay in our transitional housing for up to 3 years. And so you can see in this next slide, we have, this is Edwardson Place. It's the transitional housing building for our women. We have a similar building for our men. And the transitional housing and aftercare is so important because it gives our clients and graduates the opportunity to remain in the same community that they trust and know while they begin really practicing and exercising all the tools and the skills that they've developed, all the practices that they need to hold on to. And during this 3 years, they're required to work, volunteer, or pursue further education. And actually, a lot of them get jobs with Hope Mission. We really love to hire our graduates because it just helps them continue to move forwards in a less scary way. And every way that we can ease this transition is really important. You know, unfortunately, life doesn't stop throwing stressors our way just because we'd like it to. And for our graduates who are just in this early stage of recovery, when life throws hardships their way, they need to be able to turn to people they know and trust to help them, guide them through this process. So that's why our transitional housing is so important. And, at this point, I'd actually love to share with you a video testimony from one of our graduates, and her name is Val.
You know how your mother is always supposed to tell you, oh, I love you and stuff like that? When you don't have someone around to tell you that, you don't really believe it. Both my parents were addicts, a lot of abuse in my home, so I never got to be a child. And I've seen a lot of things a child shouldn't have seen. At the age of 6, I got apprehended. I was in pretty much every group home in Edmonton. I wanted to go home to my mom, so I did whatever I could to not stay in the group home, right? And then when I was 9 years old, my mom finally got me back. And then when I came home one day and the social worker was home, she said, your mom signed you over PGO. My mom doesn't want me, nobody wants me. At 14, I kind of was on my own from there, like on the streets. Feeling of abandonment led me to criminal activity and use with drugs and stuff. When I was in jail, I went to a chapel, and this lady, Kathy, she was speaking in jail. And she said, God saves those who are most broken and most lost in spirit. My whole life I was built on survival. Had to play this role of, I'm so tough, I'm so strong, you can't do anything to hurt me, right? I'm so broken right now and I'm so lost in spirit. Like, if God saves those people, then God can save me. I swear that day when she said that is the day that, like, I felt like I was going to be saved, because that is what I felt was missing. Because that's what I was always searching for, was someone to save me. She gave me a Bible and I started to read it every night in jail. And when I was in jail, that's when I heard about the Wellsprings program. So when I left jail, my mom, she drove me to the Wellsprings program and I did my intake and they let me in. I found that learning to believe in God, that's what made me stronger. And yeah, there's a lot of good classes there that helped me share and heal a lot of things that I kept hidden inside myself for a long time. I've tried treatment before many times and it never worked. If it wasn't for the community, then the program wouldn't be the program. We did like an hour of worship, and then after that, we'll break out into our morning group. They do like mental health class or classes on triggering, like triggers and like how to overcome them. And then we do other classes like Grace class, where you talk about things you went through and you share them with people so you don't have to keep them inside of yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of good classes there that helped me share and heal a lot of things that I kept hidden inside myself for a long time. I used to be one of those people that was out on the street late at night walking around, that was probably hungry and needed something to eat. And if I wouldn't have gone to Hope Mission, I don't know. I don't even want to think about that. I don't know where I would be right now.
Her testimony gets me every time. It's really an honor and a privilege for us to work with men and women like Val. And I think, throughout the gospel, we see time and time again that Christ continues to turn towards those that we're often tempted to turn away from. Jesus was in the business of taking people who'd become isolated and bringing them back into community. He was busy touching the untouchable and speaking with the unspeakable and loving the unlovable. So when I think about how God might be challenging me and us to, serve and care for and consider the vulnerable members of our community, it might be something like donating, it might be serving, volunteering, or even working at a place like Hope Mission. But it might also be that he's challenging you to turn towards when you're tempted to turn away. I think, especially in our busy culture, we all experience it where we see someone and we keep on walking. We notice something and we walk on. But if we open our hearts to the guiding of God's Spirit, we might find that maybe we have time and capacity to offer them a cup of coffee, maybe a sandwich even. Maybe we decide that we'd actually like to sit with them and hear about what they have to share, if they'd like to share it. I have met somebody who was a professor, but his wife passed away, and he didn't have the finances to take care of her funeral. And he also didn't have a community. And one thing led to another. And without people to support him in his grief and his financial distress, he wound up in a situation where he was addicted to alcohol and alone on the streets. I've met someone else who deeply loved God, knew scripture backwards and forwards, probably better than most of us, to be honest, but who also struggled with a mental illness that was so difficult, it was very hard for him to stay housed. I have many, many, many times regretted turning away, but I have not once regretted turning towards. And really seeing the face of Christ in the vulnerable and hurting members of our community. And of course, Hope Mission is very passionate about serving and caring for these people experiencing homelessness, but we're also really passionate about preventing that experience in the first place. And that's where our preventative programs come in. And I would love it if we could check out what that slide is. Perfect. So our preventative programs, the passion for these developed over many, many years of observing that the vast majority of people who came and used Hope Mission services had lives that began in childhood struggle, adversity, pain, trauma, and food insecurity, among many other things. And so we really, for a long time, wanted to find a way to work with these people when they were young, before they came into a situation where they showed up at the doors of a place like Hope Mission. And this passion really took off when our current director, executive director Bruce Reith, came onto his position in 1985, as he's always had a huge heart for families and kids, and really made a priority to get our preventative ministries up and running. And that began with our Tegler Youth Center in Edmonton. I think we've got a next slide there. Perfect. So it started with our RW Tegler Youth and Sports Center, which is an amazing place. It's got rock climbing wall and a skateboard park, and kids just love all of the different things that we have there. But we really quickly came to realize it wasn't just kids in Edmonton that needed support, but families across Alberta were struggling. In fact, 1 in 6 households with children experience food insecurity. 1 in 6 households with children experience food insecurity. That's a lot. Basically, it means every day, probably, you're encountering people whose kids have experienced that. And so, we of course, reached out to our community, and as always, they rose up to the call and the challenge. And we've since been able to branch out into 4 other cities. We are in Calgary, Wetaskiwin, Camrose, and Red Deer, as well as Edmonton, with preventative ministries as the focus in all of these cities. On top of that, we've also been blessed with 2 beautiful properties. One is just outside of Calgary, the other is an hour outside of Edmonton. And at these places, we're able to put on wonderful summer camp programs for kids to enjoy. So what the programming looks like in our preventative ministries, if you want to head to the next slide, is, of course, food. Food is huge and central to all of our programming. The reality is that when we first built the Tegler, we didn't actually have food as a part of the programming. But the first question that kids would have when they showed up at our doors was if there was food. And when we said no, it did not matter how cool our skateboard park was when they didn't have the time to be busy being kids, because they had to focus on feeding their bellies. And so we quickly changed that, and food is now a part of everything that we do. Before the pandemic, we were in schools and putting on after-school programs there, and that is where we would feed kids, as well as, of course, our youth drop-in center. We would provide youth with a hot meal then as well. But during the pandemic, which we're still, I really am tempted to say, but when the pandemic came to a close, but it hasn't yet. But during this time, we weren't able to put on our programs. So we had to find other ways of getting food in kids' bellies. And, as frustrating and heart-wrenching as it was for us to not be able to put on these programs, God just time and time again shows up and blows us away with, the opportunities that he provides for ministry. And so the door that he opened for us was across Alberta. I'll talk specifically about Edmonton, but these same things were happening all over the province. We had more schools reaching out to us as they noticed that there were more kids that were going hungry. And so we partnered with 10 different schools in putting together a bagged lunch program. So we were making and delivering over 2,500 bagged lunches a week in Edmonton alone to these 10 different schools. And they would then, of course, give them to their kids who needed it. We also began putting together food hampers for families. So we are providing food hampers every month to over 200 families in Edmonton. And here's really where another door opened for us was when we showed up at the front doors of families' homes. something changed in our relationship with them. You know, a lot of the parents and caregivers we encounter have some trust issues with, organizations and things like that, just from prior experiences, from trauma in their past. So they had a lot of barriers and walls up for us. But when we showed up with these hampers at their front doors, those walls came down. We had parents asking us why it was that we were doing this for them. And we were able to say, because we love you, we care about you, God loves you, and we have your back. And that changed. It changed everything. They began opening up and sharing with us about the other burdens and difficulties that they had. And out of that, we developed our family wellness team to work strictly with parents and caregivers. And I will pass that on to Beth, as again, that's what she does.
So yes, this is the original reason actually that I was hired for Hope Mission and my introduction into Hope Mission as an employee. And it was a really great opportunity to see Hope Mission, constantly meeting the needs of the community. It was a huge time of transition, especially for Taylor, because they had been used to being open and having kids in their doors, and they quickly adjusted to meet the needs of the community. So it was really great. And like Lauren said, the program, the Hope Family Wellness Program, kind of came out of that. And the Hope Family Wellness Program is run by me and Megan, my other coworker, who's also a community health nurse. And our program really is rooted in relationships. It's rooted in meeting with families and kind of talking with them again. And we have the opportunity to spend more time with them, to sit with them and to learn from them and to hear more about their stories. And then also too, when we first started the program, it was a little bit hard to get started. There was definitely needs there, but again, like Lauren said, some of them were very hesitant to reach out and to ask for that help or to take that help as well. So a lot of the time was really just building those relationships and building those networking. I'll tell a story of one of our moms who God definitely brought to our community, and we were really glad to meet her. It was the beginning of the start of our program, so I think it was about January. At this point, Taylor had let us know about a bunch of families who they felt had a variety of needs that they had mentioned with them, and that they wanted us to kind of reach out to. And so we would call these families and we would talk to them and we would explain. Sometimes we'd mention that we were nurses, and sometimes that was a good thing. Sometimes we'd mention we were nurses and they were very fearful of that. So it was, at the beginning, it was really hard to get kind of into those houses and get into the families and to meet with them. And at one point, actually, one of our administrators just asked us to phone call some of the hamper list families, just because she didn't have enough people covering the phone calls. So we were just calling families, letting them know when their delivery date was, totally not thinking about it, but this is when God had brought to us a family. The mom had mentioned to us that she needed a house. Unfortunately, her house was no longer livable for her, for a variety of reasons. It wasn't an emergency, thankfully, but she needed to move somewhere else, and so she was completely lost with how to do that. Thankfully, Megan was on the phone call and kind of recognized that this is something that God has brought to us and that we were perfectly situated to help. That's why we were brought on the team. So we let her know that we are here and we can help her. We brought her into our office. We would have coffee and tea. We would talk with her. And we began looking for houses. We would look for houses that were just publicly listed. Unfortunately, a lot of those were out of their financial ability. They had 5 children with them. And so they needed a big space, but unfortunately they needed a more affordable place. We started looking into different programs that you could help with housing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of restrictions with those. And when it comes to community health nursing, that's one of the biggest things we really focus on, is understanding that there are barriers to a lot of people and to a lot of needs that people have, and really trying to find ways to get around those barriers. So it was no challenge for us. We kept searching, and thankfully we were able to find a place. I had the very great privilege of being able to go with her. We went on to the walk through. We were able to sign everything together, and it was so great to just see over months of work have this, joy of a reward of being able to have a place that she was safe, a place that met the needs that her family had. And of course, the same as all, when you're meeting with somebody for months and months, of course, other things come up. So we got the privilege to work with her through very difficult circumstances, connect her for different resources. Unfortunately, because she moved far away from the city, we had to let her go, which was also very hard after working months with her. But another thing that we really try to do, especially as nurses, but as well in just this industry, is connect her to the other resources in the neighborhood. So we made sure that we met with her and met with the other organizations and said, hey, these are the people that can help you, and these are the ways they can assist you. She still checks in with us, and not that long ago we talked with her, and she's doing really well and enjoying her home and feeling a lot safer than when we first met her. So it's been quite a privilege. And as well, through our program, we've also been able to start this program called A Health for Two. And Health for Two is really a program that we run with AHS as well. And it's a program focused on pregnant moms. So anybody who is pregnant can come to this program. And it's really to assist them, again, with the barriers they face, potentially for a variety of reasons. We're able to help them with milk coupons. We're able to help them with vitamins. We help them get to their appointments and make sure they have appointments. So we're with them throughout the time of their pregnancy, and up to 2 months is traditionally what the Health for Two program is. So once their baby is born, and then their baby turns that 2 months old, unfortunately, most of the Health for Two programs in the city kind of end there, and they say, hopefully you're doing well, here's some other resources, and just kind of carry on. But thankfully, because we run a family program out of a youth center, we don't have to say goodbye at that point. That's something where we can transition them back into our program and still help them again with the variety of needs, whether it be housing, whether it be financial need, whether it be food, which again is a very big need. Sometimes with clothing, a variety of things. Families can call up and just mention they're having a concern or an issue, and we're there to help. And so it's really great to be able to be a part of this program and to see this transition in Taylor, because now we're at a point where we can help families and clients from the point of them being in the womb all the way into their adults. And oftentimes we also work with grandparents as well. So it's really great to be able to see that multi-generational families and to be able to be, the hands and feet of God and to really support them and to walk beside them.
Oh, so good. One of the great things about these doors that opened is that just because things open up in terms of COVID, while things are opening up, doesn't mean that we have to close these doors that God opened for us at the beginning of the pandemic. So we are continuing on, of course, with this family wellness team because it serves our families in such wonderful ways. We are continuing to provide bagged lunches. Now this fall that's started up again, we're actually making over 3,000 bagged lunches a week. And we're, of course, continuing with our food hampers. Because things have opened up, we are able to put on some of our programming again. While we're not able to do it in schools, we're able to invite youth back into our Taylor Youth Center. We're able to have kids back into our youth center and provide them with all kinds of things, whether it's homework help, having a fun time hanging out with our skateboard park and with our lounging area with foosball tables and ping pong and pool tables, or our music room, learning how to play different instruments, as well as learning about God and how much He loves them, and also just teaching them about things like how to deal with the stress that they're experiencing at home, how to process through the trauma that they've encountered in their short lives. And a lot of these things involve being surrounded with community, involve how to eat healthy and be physically active. Surprisingly, of course, along with prayer, like we all know, prayer works, right? But also having healthy life habits really helps with processing stress and working through those things. So we make all of that a part of what we do with kids. And it's so rewarding when ultimately the biggest thing we give them is a safe space where they're able to come and, just as they are, be who they are and develop relationships with caring, trusted adults who they can turn to for anything and come to know that they are loved and valuable and seen by God. I think Beth is going to close us off with some of the things she's learned at Hope Mission. But before we do that, I just want to thank you again for all of the ways you've supported this ministry. It's because of communities like yours that we get to make sure kids are fed. We get to make sure that they get to know about a God who deeply loves them. We get to ensure that families are growing together and having healthier homes. If it wasn't for churches like yours, we wouldn't get to be the people that show up at the front doors of families who have just lost a parent, or whose kid is in the hospital, or who've just lost employment and don't know how they're going to put food on the table. So thank you for helping us to prevent homelessness in the first place by being the support system that all families need, but not all families get. I'll pass it off to you.
So just like Lauren had said, we meet a lot of people in our lives who have a variety of needs, who have a lot of different circumstances they come from, a lot of different traumas. And so it's not just the inner city. It's not just the people that you hear about stories about. They're people that we meet every day. They're people that we speak with every day and people that we know very well as well. And so I've been really blessed. Honestly, it's been quite a miracle for me to be able to be placed in this this ministry, and I'm very thankful for that, but it doesn't come for free. Of course, there's a lot of things that I have learned and will continue to learn. I just wanted to share some of those things that I've learned. And again, this isn't just true for the inner city, this is true for everybody that we meet, and especially because everybody has traumas and experiences of their own. So without further ado, here are 10 things, nice easy 10 things that I've learned. The first thing is to just meet people where they're at. I think that's one of the biggest things that has been really incredible about Hope Mission, but as well as just the ministry of being a community health nurse and working with people, is to just meet them where they're at. People come from a variety of backgrounds, and it's not our place to say, come meet us here. Sometimes we need to step in and meet them where they're at, whether that be a place that we're not comfortable in, or that be a place that might be a little bit scary and out of our comfort zone. With God, we can meet them where they're at and kind of start from there. Number 2, give them space. So just because people are reaching out and need help, just like at the beginning of the program, a lot of them had mentioned they needed help, but they needed that time and that space to really settle in, to meet people, to understand. So give people space. Give them space for healing, for asking for help. And I've always said, too, that if you're quiet enough, you can really start to hear people's hearts rather than just what's coming from their mouths. Number 3 is to be a curious investigator. The actions and behaviors you see on the surface often have much deeper roots. That's why we meet them where they're at, and that's why we give them the space, so we can find out what's really going on deep down. And as a community health nurse, that's also one of the biggest things, is to just find out those roots, where they're at, and if they're in a healthy place or not, and to help people to establish roots that are far more healthier. Another one, which I kind of alluded to anyways, is give people time. So Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is breaking through your trauma, neither is building healthy habits, neither is growing. So give people some time. The next one, number 5, is advocate. So this is a big thing. A lot of us have a lot of privilege that we either know of or don't always recognize or don't always see in our daily lives. But with that comes the opportunity and the chance to be able to advocate for people. So however that works for you, whether, again, that's giving you money, giving time, speaking up when other people aren't speaking up, standing in defense, advocate for people. Number 6 is a very practical one, and this is just something that my inner city nurse cannot stand up here and not say at a time like this, but carry naloxone, or at least learn about naloxone. Unfortunately, this crisis is extending far beyond the inner city. I know that I have heard stories of people having overdoses in Windermere, in very wealthy neighborhoods. A lot of children, a lot of youth are also struggling with this. So take the time, go to a pharmacy, learn about naloxone, and maybe carry one with you. Number 7 is that every opportunity is a moment to share Jesus, but more than that, also it's a moment to share about the kingdom of God and the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit of Jesus. It's an opportunity to share that love, that grace, that patience, that peace, and even just that joy of God. Number 8 is always take people at their word. I remember there was one time that I was talking with a client, and he mentioned to me that he had a pilot's license. And he had said to me that every time he tells people that story, they say, "No way," or "That's incredible, like, I can't believe it. No way, that's crazy." And unfortunately, they meant that in the most positive way. But to him, that meant that they didn't believe him. They didn't think he could ever do that. He was here without shoes, struggling, and no way he could be a pilot. So take people at their word. Sometimes they might be joking, but at least you look like the fool, right? We can handle it. Let them have the honor of telling you more about their stories and take them at their word. Number 9 is intercessory prayer. So again, we talked about it. Prayer works. Pray over these people. Pray over these circumstances. Pray over the people that you know in your lives and the people that you don't know. Pray for the people that you have met or the people that you may meet. And really pray into them. And the last one is to celebrate. So a lot of times some of this stuff is really heavy. A lot of things that people go through are really hard. But let's celebrate. Celebrate the small moments. Celebrate the big moments. All the kingdom of God is really a celebration of the joy that we have through him. So take those moments to really celebrate those wins and even celebrate just the small steps that we get a little bit closer to that big win. Those are the 10 things that I've learned, and I look forward to learning more.
Thank you guys so much for having us this morning. It's truly been an honor.